Welcome to another episode of Sisters in Service. I am your host, Kat Corchado. And today on our show, I am interviewing KP Phillips. Of course, he's a veteran. He's also a fellow podcaster, but we're going to find out a little bit more about his story and how he came into podcasting and why he does the podcasting. So KP, welcome to Sisters in Service. So nice to have you.
Kat, thank you for having me.
I know that you are an Army brat, correct?
That is correct. I am an Army brat. My dad was drafted in Vietnam, and you can hear about him. He was my first interview ever on podcast because I was so nervous and I didn't know what I was doing. And he talks about his time when he was drafted for Vietnam and his whole 20-year military career, how he was drafted. And then by the time he finished up Ranger School and all of his schooling, the war was finishing up. So this was in like 1971. So he didn't get a chance to actually go to Vietnam, but he was drafted under the circumstances for that. And so he did 20 years. He's actually originally from the Midwest, and my mom's side of the family is from Hawaii. So when I say Midwest, I'm talking about
nice.
Kentucky. Yeah, I'm talking about Kentucky. So yeah. It was interesting. My dad actually retired when I was around 13 years old, and he moved back to the state of Ohio, where he's from, where he actually ended up. He grew up in Kentucky, but then moved to Ohio later in life. So it was a big transition for me to go from Hawaii to Ohio at an early age.
I bet that's a huge shift. You know, one of the things we have in common is that I am an Air Force brat. And when you are born into that kind of lifestyle, you don't know anything else really. And you think it's just normal. You think all kids go to different countries, move every 3 to 5 years until someone tells you, oh my gosh, you poor thing, you keep moving. And we're like, what? This is normal. So did you think it affected you going from school to school, different schools at certain times? Or did you just think this is what we do? This is normal stuff?
So that's a really good question. Actually, I think it affected me positively and negatively because, as you know, our military community is fairly small in comparison to the rest of the population. We're like 5 to 8% of the total U.S. population. So now as an adult, when I run into people like where I currently live, they've lived here for years, went to high school here, have like deep rooted friends that, they all like went through school together and grew up together. And then here I am. I just moved, to Los Angeles here 5 years ago. It did, in a sense, affect me of not having those deep relationships, but it also helped me out as far as being an extrovert and being social and learning how to build friends, like in a new place, in a new like culture side of, our country, because our country is really split up into so many different cultures and people don't think about it much, but think about New England and how people talk and what they eat up there. And then you got the South and how people talk and how they speak and what they eat down there. And then you got Hawaii where they speak pidgin English and you got like a mixed plate of Asian Pacific Islanders. So you grow up like meeting so many great people and learning how to build these really fast, friendships with people. Whereas someone that grows up in one place their whole life, they're kind of been, that whole aspect's been taken away from them.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with you because on the one hand, we got to see places that other kids never got to see, and you have to be an extrovert. If you're an introvert as a military brat, oh my God, I don't know what to say about that. You learn how to make friends quickly. On the other hand, my husband, who grew up in New England his entire life. I mean, we could go back home now and he could introduce me to someone he went to school with in third grade. I couldn't even tell you what school I went to in third grade. Okay.
Right.
But it's a trade-off, it's a little bit different. And the fact that you said your dad was an Army Ranger, my father-in-law was an Army Ranger during the Vietnam War. And my father went to Vietnam for a year. Did you find that your dad didn't get to go, correct? Because
No.
it was ending. Yeah, it was, but he got to go to Army Ranger School. How cool is that?
Yeah. And, the military back then was much different. And
it was.
He served 5 years as a drill sergeant out in Fort Knox as well. And so I think things were a lot grittier and a lot more
Yeah.
raw back then. Some of the things that he tells me, how they used to do things, it's to me sounds pretty insane. Like,
Right.
so yeah,
Did your dad have that whole, drill sergeant persona? You see them,
mhm,
and even if you're in civilian clothes, you
yeah,
feel like you need to salute them.
mhm, yeah, yeah. He had that I think that whole drill instructor school thing, man, it really creates a sense of confidence that you exude, that you display even when you're not in uniform. And so he definitely had that throughout his whole career, and the whole family thought so too.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah,
cool. So you moved from Hawaii to Ohio, correct?
yeah, that's correct.
What was that like? I mean, was that like culture shock for you?
Huge. It was a huge culture shock. I mean, there's certain things that you do in Hawaii that you don't do on the mainland, and like just even the cuisine, like what you eat. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just like you have Zippies, you have L&L, and it's just a mixture of Asian Pacific Islander type of food. And so, like one thing I remember is at recess, we used to always, when I lived in Hawaii, we used to always eat like the dried ramen noodles, and
Mhm.
all the kids ate it. And I remember the
Mhm.
first time I did that in Ohio, people looked at me like, "What are you doing?" Like, I don't
What's
know.
wrong with you? We don't need it like that here.
That's what I always do. It's a snack.
Well, I think one of the things is being, you know, an Air Force brat was that going to different countries, you learn to appreciate different cuisines and different foods.
Mhm,
My dad would always make us go off base and eat off on the economy. Okay.
mhm,
And so I have a very wide palate for food. There's very little that I don't like. So that's either good or bad,
mhm,
depending on the person. But do you find that you can eat almost anything? Like you don't, how some people are very picky, they only like certain things. But are you
mhm.
kind of like, yeah, bring it. I'll eat it. It looks good.
Yeah, I definitely love a lot of different types of foods. And I do think that there are, like, even here in Southern California, there's things that you know the family that I have back in Ohio, things that they enjoy, things that they cook, things that they make, that like even my girlfriend here, she's like, "What's that?" And so when we go back there, she gets the chance to also experience like a little bit different types of foods that people
Yes.
traditionally eat. So, like I live in, like I said, Southern California, so a lot of Mexican cuisines here.
Mm.
You go to Ohio, and I think about all you really have is like Taco Bell, and
Right? It's
it's
like,
not
how
the
can
same.
they? I know. I did a lot of my formative years in New Mexico. And I had a friend whose mom used to make homemade tortillas, homemade refried beans. My
Yeah.
favorite was enchiladas. She would make homemade enchiladas. So when someone says, "Oh, this Mexican restaurant is good," I'm like, by whose
Hmm.
standard? I mean, when you've
Right.
had the real deal,
Hmm.
anything else is short. It's like, it's okay. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, it's kind of made me a snob when it comes to certain
I know, me too.
certain things. I'm like, this isn't real.
I know you're like, this is not real Mexican, just
Right.
saying.
Yeah.
But California, Texas, all of those places, man, they've got the real deal.
Yeah.
They've got some good food. Tell me a little bit about high school. Now you had a counselor who told you that you weren't college material. Can you take us back to that a little bit?
Yeah. So I grew up in a sort of a broken home, I guess. My parents got divorced, right when my dad retired out of the military, and it it was one of those situations where when things aren't right at home, you really can't. It's really hard to achieve. It's hard to go to school and put your best foot forward and get good grades and things like that. My dad always did the best that he could, but the situation was just not a good situation. So I struggled for years in school. Like I was in special ed for from first through ninth grade. And it was one of those things where once you're in, you're in. Like it's hard to get out. And you kind of get stuck in that system where they take you to a special room and they let you like take your time with your work and just kind of not really challenge you all that much. And so for me, I didn't come until after my parents got divorced and my dad got remarried, and things at home started to settle down for me. did I start thinking about the future? Well, at that point, I was like a sophomore, junior in high school. And um, at that, at that stage, I was like, I want to go to college. But I didn't, admittedly, I was a C student, like it maybe D, F's every now and then. And I was always
Sprinkled
involved
in for flavor.
yeah, just in there, just here and there. And I was always involved in sports, which was good. But when I attempted to sign up for college classes my junior year, like I was straight up told that, hey, you're like, those classes are meant for the students that are going to be going to college. And I was like, well, I do plan on going to college and I'd like to go to college. And she made me sign up. This specific high school counselor made me sign up for all these really, really like low level classes. And I ended up getting all A's and B's that year. And then the following year I had a new counselor, and I told him like what happened and how I wanted to like be challenged. And he let me sign up for those classes. And I did well in those as well. So, I was a guy that was pretty much told that, hey, you're not good enough, and go to this special room for like 9 years. And I was able to test out of special ed actually my sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think that kind of put a chip on my shoulder at an early age, in a sense, to work harder, because I wasn't naturally smart. I had to work harder and try to be persistent, and I had to take the extra time to study, versus some of the other kids, and that was
where it comes easy for them.
Yeah, I mean, I literally knew people that could just show up for class. Even in college, I knew people that could just show up for class, and they didn't have to study. They just got A's, A's and B's across. That wasn't me at all. I had to work really hard.
I hate that. I had to work so hard, just to, I teach Pilates, and I had a client that he was telling the story of how he was drunk a lot in college, and graduated with honors. And when they called his name during graduation, someone yelled out, bullshit. Okay. Because they didn't believe. Okay. But he was one of those people that could take tests and be hungover, or leave the bar at 2 a.m. and say, I got a test at 7, go study until 7, take the test and get an A. And I was like, how was that?
Yeah.
I'm so mad. I missed out somewhere.
Yeah, it's good for them. But yeah, for me, when it came to like anything math related, I was like getting a tutor. And all through college, I did whatever it took. I mean, thinking back now, I would get up at 5 a.m. just to go to see a tutor, and just whatever it took to just get through. And I think that's how a lot of military people are, is we adapt and we overcome.
Right. Well, I mean, you have to find the way that you learn. Not everyone learns orally. Not everyone hears, some people can hear stuff and remember. Some people can read it once and remember. That's totally not me, by the way. But you have to find that way. And in the military, you find that way to make rank or do whatever it is you need to do. So when in your senior year, you decided to enlist in the Army. Now, is that because you believed what the counselor said, or did you just said, you know what, I'm going in the Army and I'll go to college while I'm in the Army?
Yeah. So senior year rolls around, and my dad just straight up told me, he said, son, you did good in your last, couple of years in school, but you weren't smart enough to get a scholarship. And he says, you can go to community college, you can stay here. But I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, there's no way I'm doing that. I'm going to college. So I initially was going to go active duty Army, just straight in full time. And I had the recruiter come over and talk to us. And my dad, he'd never gone to college before. And my mom hadn't either. And he said, if you're going to go into the military, I'd rather you go in as an officer. And so just so happened that I had an a former football coach, an assistant football coach that was a National Guard recruiter. And I reached out to him, and he came over and talked to us about what they were offering. And at the time they were offering 100% tuition assistance to any state funded college in Ohio. So I signed up for the Army National Guard the middle of my senior year, and then I left for basic training about 3 days after I graduated high school. And then I was enlisted for 4 years in the National Guard. And in my junior year of college, that's where I signed up for the SMP Green to Gold program, and I went from an E5 to a cadet. And then the day I graduated college, that's the day I pinned on my butter bar, my second lieutenant rank, and that's when I went active duty.
Did you like being an officer?
I did. I did. And the reason I enjoyed being an officer was because I always felt like I was involved in big picture things, and I felt like the position itself allowed me to have more of an impact on more of an influence, more of an impact on the folks that I was in charge of.
I never wanted to be an officer. I mean, not, it was just, I was like, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good here. So I never saw the big picture. I was just trying to do what I needed to do, because I was a single parent in the military. So I don't know, maybe I would have been a good officer. I don't know. But that's pretty awesome considering that counselors said that to you. And then you're like, yeah, look, did you ever go back and say, see these?
No, she left, went to a different school, and she didn't know me very well. I
Yeah.
went to a lot of different schools growing up,
Yeah,
even
me
after the
too.
military, even after military. Like I got bounced around from after my parents got divorced. I lived with my dad for a while, lived with my mom, and that didn't work out too well. We ended up, something I didn't talk about for years, but I lived in a women's shelter for about a year and a half or so, and lived in a camper with her and Section 8 housing, and then moved back in with my dad. And that's when, like I said, high school was when things started like settling down for me when he got remarried. And even when I went to this new school, this counselor didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
She just saw my grades, and that was it. And I really, in a sense, I kind of appreciated that situation because it was like a challenge. And looking back, it's, you need those situations to motivate yourself to light that fire inside of you to prove everyone wrong.
I agree with that somewhat, but some kids aren't built like that. If you tell them you're not college material, they're going to go, okay. And they're not even going to try. Where some people like, oh, really? Watch this,
Right.
and they'll kind of double up and do what they need to do. So you get out of the military, and did you get out because you're like, okay, I'm done? And what did you do after the military?
So I signed up for the National Guard originally, just mainly for college. I mean, it wasn't because I was young. I didn't understand a whole lot. And even though my dad was in the military for 20 years, it's funny because even when I went to basic training, I didn't know what a drill sergeant was. Like my dad was a drill sergeant for 5 years. I go to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, like 3 days after graduating high school, and I was not expecting that. I was not expecting for those
You're like,
for those.
wait a minute, this isn't the way it's supposed to go.
Yeah, no, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking. I just show up to Fort Leonard Wood, and all of a sudden, these guys with drill sergeant hats come in, just screaming at us, and I'm like, wow, like what did I sign up for? So when I signed up for the National Guard, it was strictly for like college, to be honest. And while I was in the National Guard, that's when and through training and stuff, that's where I kind of gained that patriotism and started appreciating like the military and what it had to offer. And I could have done my time in the National Guard and just gotten out. I decided that the opportunity was there. My old platoon sergeant actually suggested to me, said, "Hey, why don't you consider becoming an officer?" And I was like, I never even thought about it. So I looked into it, and then I could have gotten out with my bachelor's degree and out of the National Guard, and I decided to serve the extra time, the extra 4 years as an officer, um, just to I guess to prove to myself and to make my family proud of me and to also serve my country. And at the time, Iraq and Afghanistan was going on, so I knew
Yes.
that I was going to deploy at some point, more than likely. And so the reason I got out was just because that's all I had planned on doing, was just the extra 4 years as a commissioned officer. And a lot of people were surprised in my family, were surprised that I got out. They thought I was going to be like my dad and just be a lifer. But, I wanted to get in, get the experience, and then move on.
Right. Looking back, are you glad that you went that route?
I'm very glad. I'm very glad I went that route. I think that the military forces you to make very tough decisions. It wasn't easy to leave home, even for basic training. We all remember what it's like to go down to get dropped off at that hotel the night before you're leaving out, and I see you smiling because you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Do.
You know, the long faces, the tears, saying goodbye to your family, like knowing for the first time that you are literally going to be on your own and there's nobody there to answer for you except for yourself. Those are things that I think a lot of people miss out on. Just simply it forced me to turn that chapter and to grow up. And my military career did that every single time. Like even when I went active duty as an officer, and then I was deployed like right after I got my right out of officer course. Like I was not even a year out of college, and I was in Iraq. And so even when I left for my deployment, I felt the same way I did that night that my dad dropped me off at the hotel before I go into basic training. I think I really appreciate my military career for pushing me along in life and forcing me to just continue to grow up and learn and gain a lot of experience.
I think it teaches you to rely and trust yourself.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes when you go in the military, your food's taken care of, your shelter's taken care of, you just show up for work. It teaches you responsibility, but it also teaches you to rely on you, not your family, not your friends, but on yourself. And when you're late to work, you get in trouble, you can't blame anyone else. Oh, mom didn't wake me up on time. It's like, no, dude, you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn.
Yes.
You really do learn. And so was your transition difficult after coming out of the military?
So my transition out of the military, you know how they say that you can be your own worst enemy? I decided to go at it on my own. Like the number of programs out there that are available today to assist military veterans, that wasn't the same back in 2007 when I got out at all, not even close. And I decided that I actually went to a headhunter conference where they put me in front of a whole bunch of hiring managers and recruiters. And one of the gentlemen that I spoke to the night before all the interviews, we were just practicing the interview, and he just told me straight out. He goes, "Look," he goes, your grades in college were okay. They weren't great, but understand that tomorrow your competition, they're going to be academy graduates. They're going to be people who were held technical positions in the military. Whether it's a pilot or something very involved, and that's going to be your competition. So you need to describe yourself as someone who wasn't born with a silver spoon in their mouth. You're a scrapper. Everything that you got, you earned on your own, and it's through your persistence and your never give up attitude. And so that kind of gave me the overall understanding that it was going to be a struggle no matter what. And when I resigned my commission, like I got my date to get out, like you get out, like it's no like 2 weeks notice or nothing like that. When you're in the military, like you're on the street, that's it. Right.
So, like, okay, bye. Thank you.
To get those lines to intersect of like job, location, start date, all that stuff was so difficult. And I basically at the end of it all, I only had one offer on the table, and it was working for an aeronautics company in Indianapolis. And I wanted to be in sales. That's what I wanted to be in some type of sales, just because I enjoy talking to people, and I enjoy helping people out, helping them level themselves up. And I felt like sales was a place for me to, utilize my extrovert skills, my experiences to relate to people, to build those relationships. I felt like that's where I needed to be. But I ended up in operations, in manufacturing for an aeronautics company. And I was there for about a year, and it just wasn't for me at the end of it all. And so it was a little bit of a struggle. This particular company I'm talking about, they hired like 7 military veterans, all officers. And I think after the first year, six of us had moved on and got something else.
It's totally different. I can absolutely speak to the fact that there was nothing out there. I retired April 1st, 2000. So imagine, okay, nothing out there. There's no Facebook groups. There's none of these organizations that are usually out there. And I was in a meeting, I was in a networking group with someone on Saturday with a bunch of veterans and organizations. And this one guy was like, there's so much out there. Well, how do I pick? And I said, it's like drinking from a fire hose. But when I tell you, I'd rather have that than have zero, because that's what was out there, was zero, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard now, but it's not as hard because you have people who are in your corner, that can help you out. So you decide to leave after a year. When did podcasting come in?
So over the years, I've always wanted to do something that was kind of a big outreach within the military community. And podcasting didn't really come around for me until maybe 5-6 months ago. But before that, I tried YouTube for a while. And it's kind of hard when you're not a technical savvy guy. It's or gal. It's not really something that comes easy. But again, that being adaptable and learning and reading and getting out the field manual and breaking it down, and so
get that SOP out there.
I started to look into podcasting mainly because I wanted to understand what was the deeper relationship or the deeper meaning that you gained from listening to a podcast. And it's like right now, YouTube, you only on there for about 5-10 minutes max, and then you lose the audience's attention, right? So on the podcast, you can actually get more involved, 30-45 minutes, and get to know who it is that's speaking and get to know the host as well. So that's what I really like about podcasting, I think, the most, and is being able to garner that deep relationship with your listeners.
It is. And I think that you also have to be an extrovert. You can't be afraid to talk to people. But I also feel like when people listen, they're listening for you, the host. They're listening for the subject matter, and they're also listening to the guest. But I think it's a combination of all of it, and sometimes you can have a great guest and the host sucks, a great host and the guest sucks. You might be forgiven for that. But, I totally agree with you, because everyone wants to go on YouTube. It's like, oh, I got to be visual. I got to do audio and video. And I'm not ready for that yet. I'm kind of snuggled in here like this. I'm like, okay, this is cool. I like this,
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I really miss the days where we could actually get those types of like deep, intimate type of relationships with the things that we would be involved with. And I feel like today it's all about the real quick, like video, or the real quick, like viral thing that's coming out, and I'm more of a, like, I want to sit down and really feel like I'm in this, and I'm there. And I think that's what podcasting has to offer over a lot of the other social media platforms out there. Yeah, so.
I totally agree with that. But I also think that a lot of people are doing a podcast because it's just a thing to do now, because it's cool. They're not in it for the long haul. I feel that you're in it for a while. You're like, look, I'm dug in. This is what I'm going to do. And that's how I feel too, because people talk about monetize. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, if any organization out there, if you're listening, wants to throw money at my podcast, let me know. But I'm not charging my host, or not the host, but I'm not charging my guests or the people that listen. It's just not fair. So who would you say is the biggest personality, or anyone who is famous, who's been the biggest guest on your show?
The biggest guest to date, I have some folks that are on the horizon that I plan on interviewing. Some people actually really surprised me, man. I just did an interview with Mike Lopez from Coursera, and before that I did one with DOL coach Josh Canillo. And those guys hold positions within those two respective companies. But the conversation that we had, I was able to really relate to what they were saying, because they were both in the military. They were talking about their transition process. They were talking about things like PTSD. They were talking about feeling not 100% understood. You know, when they got out in the civilian world, they were talking about their transition. That was not what I was expecting on some of it. And I wanted to just continue that conversation and span that whole podcast out to like 2 hours, but I really couldn't for like time's sake. But though sometimes those folks that you expect to just basically get value out of talking about what it is that they're doing or what their company is offering. But then you hear like the other side of them and you're like, wow, like this gal really went through a lot, you know? So, but the biggest name that I just interviewed was Tom Tran, and he's a Hollywood comedian, actor, entertainer. He was shot in the back of the head in 2003, early on in Iraq, and survived, and talked about his whole journey, how he had to overcome a lot of the go. He was trying to get his degree. And then after he graduated, he talked about like how everything just came back and just hit him. I think during his graduation party, he had a cigarette and sat down for a few minutes, and he thought about, you know, his roommate that died in Iraq. He thought about his experience of almost, you know, getting killed. That's probably the biggest name that I've had so far. But like I said, I have a bunch of people like that I plan on interviewing here in the future.
That's amazing. Through your podcast, what do you want people to know about your podcast? Like who is your podcast targeted to? I know veterans, but is it more just letting other people who aren't veterans, knowing the story of other veterans, what they've gone through, that, you know, is it something like that?
Exactly. So it's really hard to talk to a civilian about your time in the military because they just don't simply understand. They don't even understand rank. So, I mean, they don't understand the very basics 101. And I really hope to kind of bridge that gap, to make it to where, you know, one of the reasons why I started this whole thing was because I felt like a lot of times when people would talk about military veterans, they would always talk about the folks who were, you know, down at the local bar getting drunk, or they were on drugs or something very negative. And I'm like thinking to myself, like, I know a lot of veterans, you know, just like yourself, who are bosses. They are successful. They have, you know, great careers. They've overcame all of the obstacles, and they're doing awesome. And so why aren't we talking about that? Why are we talking about the folks who are struggling? Like, why don't we talk about the success stories out there? And, you know, I hope to actually inspire, you know, the next generation as well. You know, I think that a lot of young adults and a lot of even people working in counseling fields don't fully understand what the military is truly about. You know, I think the only thing they think about is war and killing and everything else. It's like, you know, there was a guy at the grocery store the other day, and he was wearing a hat, and I think his hat said something like Afghanistan, or it said Iraq, or it said Syria. It said something on it. And I asked him, I'm like, oh, so you're in the military? And he goes, nope. He goes, I'm a peaceful man. And I'm like, what? You can't be in the military and be a peaceful man? Like, I asked him, I'm like, you think that, is that what you really think? You think that just because you're in the military, you're not a peaceful man? You're like a warmonger?
Mm-hmm.
And it's totally not true. Like, you just really want to do something bigger than yourself. And so I hope that, you know, my podcast can reach those people to, you know, better understand like what our military communities is all about.
I agree with that. I think that if we were to get some of these civilian organizations to fully understand, you know, that we're veterans, male, female, we're all veterans, whether we look like veterans or not, you know, and if they could somehow understand that we bring so much to the table, you know, not just, you know, for me, I think that when you have a resume, everybody walks on water on a resume. Everybody does. Okay. But when you get down to it and you see what people actually bring to the table, which I think, you know, in the military, you wear so many different hats. If you've ever been in a situation where you had to not only do your job, but someone else's job, you know, you learn how to juggle all of that. And so to come out of the military and be told that, yeah, you don't measure up, that's a little hard to take. that's a hard pill to swallow. And also on the fact that you were talking about how people aren't seen as veterans, which is why I wanted to do Sisters in Service, because women sometimes who are veterans are seen as very pushy, and yes, I'm going to say it, bitchy, or we're very broken. Yeah. And I want people to see that there are women veterans who are doing the damn thing. They're doing this, so I thought this is a nice time to highlight women, but again, highlighting veterans who are just, they're out there. You're doing this. I want to be like you when I grow up.
I want to be like you. You're such a great down to earth, like conversationalist person, man. I really appreciate that about you, Kat. I really do.
Well, thank you so much, KP. It's been such an honor having you on. And it's been so much fun learning more about you and your podcast. And so before you go, tell us where we can find your podcast, the name of your podcast, and how people can reach out to you. So
the name of my podcast is called The Morning Formation, and it's on every podcast platform out there. I even have a small YouTube channel, but it's kind of recycled from my old days of doing YouTube. I'm also on Instagram, The Morning Formation Podcast. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have a Facebook page as well. So I'm on all those platforms, and it's The Morning Formation. You can find me on LinkedIn, KP Phillips.
Well, again, KP, thank you so much for being on the show. I hope everyone out there got a chance to know a little bit more about KP and what he does and why he does it. I also hope you get a chance to listen to his podcast, The Morning Formation. And until next time, please take care of each other, and we will see you soon.